Welcome to TalkNorth.com. Thanks to our longtime producer, Brandon Morton. Please download before you listen. If you'd like to advertise with us, you can reach us at talknorthpodcast@gmail.com. And please follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. Welcome back to Preps Today with John Millea. John Millea, of course, is the Preps guru at mshsl.org. You can find John's journal there. This is TalkNorth.com. Please follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. It's a good place to catch all of our shows, get the links, and also see what new shows we'll be running out over the next couple of months, including our new Gopher show with Marcus Fuller and Ryan James. Check that out, as well as all of our old war horses that we've been doing for years now. This, of course, we concentrate on Minnesota prep sports. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a departure. We're also going to talk about Doug Woog, great man who is a great loss to Minnesota. Thanks to our producer, Brandon Morton, and thank you to our sponsor, Pizza Barn in Princeton. Let's start with the Wooger, John.
Yeah, Jim, you knew him. I knew him. I covered the Gophers men's hockey team for a stretch, and what a great guy the Wooger was. You know, he'd kind of fallen off the radar here the last couple of years. I know he had health issues, but it was in his tenure, Rachel Blount was on the men's hockey beat from the Star Tribune, but it was an Olympic year, so Rachel was going to be at the Winter Olympics. So I got tossed in there, and boy, was that fun. I did that for, I think, parts of 2 or 3 or 4 seasons. And that was in the old-fashioned WCHA where you could call any coach in the WCHA, and I did a weekly WCHA notebook, and you'd call the coach's office, and the coach would answer the phone. You know, you didn't have to go through anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It was small, friendly world other than on the ice during games. And Woog was Doug was the best part of that because he was this small-town South St. Paul guy. He never changed, and it was just so much fun. And the drill was you'd go to Madison, or you'd go to Houghton, Michigan, or you'd go to Colorado Springs and there'd be a Friday game. And then after the Friday game in the hotel bar, the radio guys and the newspaper guys, Wonger from the Pioneer Press and the coaches, you just sit around and tell stories, and none of it can be shared on a podcast, I'm sure, but so much fun and just a great guy. And I remember the first time I met him, I called him and I said, "Hey, Doug, this is John Millea. I'm with the Strib, and we've never met, but I'm going to start picking this thing up for Rachel." And so we met at Stubb and Herb's for lunch. It was like I'd known him my whole life, just one of these guys. And so I'm up north a couple times in the summer doing his hockey camps. I gave him a hard time because at the rink where he had summer hockey camps for kids, I was going to meet him there. I think we were doing a series at the Star Tribune about summer camps and kind of the booming business of that at the time. And this is 20 years ago. So I'm at the rink up there in some small town. I can't remember where it was. I'm going to meet Wooger at an appointed time, and there's kids out there, and he's got like his college players, I think, or younger guys basically running the camps. So where's Doug? Anybody seen a Wooger? And they're, "No, he'll be here anytime. He'll be here." So in walks Wooger, still wearing his golf glove and his shorts. I said, "Boy, running camps, this is a tough business, Wooger." And he smiled. He said it was. And just a fun guy, great loss, not just for hockey, but for Minnesota. I mean, he was kind of the quintessential Minnesota guy, friendly to everybody and seemed to know everybody, and everybody loved him. And just a tremendous guy, Doug Woog, I thought.
Yeah, he's one of my, it's not that I knew him as well as a lot of other people in this market. I didn't, but I interacted with him on a number of different levels. When I first got to town, I would do some features in the football off season. then, I started doing some investigative stuff. So sometimes I was the person who had to call Doug and ask him a question he didn't want to answer.
Sure.
I wasn't, the thing is, I approached him from so many different angles. And so for a while, we both worked at FSN together, and he was great all the time. He was always the guy you wanted to go to dinner with. He was always the guy you wanted to say hello to and chat with. Yeah. He was that way with everybody under all circumstances. And, not many people are like that. I don't think I'm good at that. I wasn't as good a guy as Doug Woog. No. He was the rare guy who was beloved by everybody for all the right reasons.
He really was, and it just the way he ran the operation when he was coaching the Gophers was really old school because, like I said, Greg Wong from the Pioneer Press, covered that team for years. And when I was on the beat, hung out with Wonger and Wooger, and we just had so much fun. And Woog basically opened up everything to the media. And this is pre-internet. Usually it was just Greg and I at the practice. We'd sit on the bench at practice. We'd talk to players and coaches during practice. In the locker room, sure, you can go in there anytime you want after practice, after games. And then when Don Lucia was hired, everything changed and became, I don't know if more professional is the word, but, we weren't sitting on the bench and we were never going in the locker room. They'd bring anybody out you wanted, whenever you wanted. But it just was so different. So Wonger and I felt like sick little puppies. We had to sit in the stands and watch practice. We were used to sitting on the bench and getting full access. So that was a little different, but it's just one of the best guys I know. And I was really taken aback when I heard the news that we'd lost the Woog. Like I said, he'd kind of pulled back from public view, and he did have those. He had Parkinson's and I think some other things. And he was 75. That's a heck of a run. I wouldn't have guessed he was 75. But that one, that's a big loss for all of us.
Absolutely. All right. Well, my condolences to everyone who knew Doug. Let's move on to some of our more typical high school topics. One coach, two teams.
Yeah, this is the current story on John's Journal. I spent a couple days up north earlier this week at Mountain Iron Buell High School. And I knew about this story. I'd kind of kept it under my hat till I can get up there. But I've never heard of anything like this, Jim. I've covered, sports at all levels, especially high schools, for a long time. So they've got one coach who's the head coach of the girls basketball team and the boys basketball team. I don't know how you do that. I've seen it work now from being up there, but
Cheryl Ray should do it.
Yeah, Cheryl could do it. No kidding. Mountain Iron Buell's been just a powerhouse girls basketball team for a long time. They went to state the last 9 years. And Jeff Buffetta is their coach. He's 44 years old. He's been coaching the girls up there for 20 years. So he was a kid when he started. He's already in the Minnesota Girls Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame. And after last season, the boys coach stepped down. So there was an opening. And Jeff told me he'd thought about someday becoming the boys coach. But so here's the opening. And he didn't want to give up the girls, though. He'd like to coach the boys. He's got a couple of young kids, elementary kids, one daughter, one son. And I think his son is in second grade, but he thought about coaching his son someday. So he was intrigued by this. And one of the assistant coaches told me last spring when Jeff approached him with this question, the guy said, Jeff said, what do you think? You think this is possible? And the assistant coach's response was, you might be nuts, but you're the only one who could pull this off. And that was kind of what everybody told me up there. This is such a crazy idea. Jeff Buffetta could probably do it. He's one of these guys. He's in there all the time anyway. He teaches 5th and 6th grade social studies, and he's basically at school all day and all night, regardless. Even in past seasons, he told me once if this girls basketball team was done practicing, he'd still hang around, watch the boys or look at film or supervise the weight room. So he's always there. But, with two teams that they only play one doubleheader this year, the girls and boys together. So they had to do some rescheduling of a handful of games. Practices, sometimes one team will practice before school if the other team has a road game after school. And then one of his assistants is also an assistant for both teams. So it's really, he kind of said once he got into the time management of it, he realized it could work. But boy, these are some long days. So I was up there Monday afternoon. I watched the boys practice, and then the girls had a game that night. And Jeff had been there, since 6:30 in the morning, didn't leave the school till, I don't know, 9:30 at night. And then the next morning at 6 a.m., the girls' team was back for practice. So if you want to read about a coach doing something remarkable, go to John's Journal at mshsl.org. I tweeted a couple of photos during the girls' game Monday night, a photo of Jeff running the boys' practice, and then a photo of him coaching the girls. And the Twitter response was really something. People didn't know if this was even real. How is that real? How can you do that? Do they practice together? Do the two teams practice together? That was one question. No, they don't. And just a lot of moving pieces, but they're making it work, and both teams are pretty good, which led to a question I had. Somebody had told me now if the girls should get back to the state tournament, which they very well could, and get to the state semifinals, they could play in Minneapolis the same day as the boys could possibly be playing for a section championship. And I think that game would be in Hibbing. And I mentioned this to Jeff, and he just kind of smiles. He said, no, I looked into that too before I decided to do this. I looked at that, and, it's doable. So, you probably need some kind of air travel, but they wouldn't. I don't think the games would necessarily be at the same times, but that'd be quite the challenge to coach one team in Minneapolis and the other team in Hibbing on the same day. So we'll keep an eye on the Mountain Iron Buell Rangers. And that was interesting. That was one for the books for me, Jim. A story like that I'd never heard of. And Jeff told me he's aware of one coach in Florida and one coach in North Carolina doing the same thing. And not too long after I posted that story and tweeted about it, the coach in Florida who does this already had seen the story and tweeted about it. And the situation there is it's a new school. It apparently is a small, brand new school. So he's coaching both basketball teams. That's a little different kind of a story. It seems like that's a little more easier to understand in a pinch. Coach both teams, get us through this first year. But pretty unique stuff.
That's amazing stuff. As someone who had trouble coaching one youth team at a time, I really can't imagine managing that. So cool stuff. Hey, we want to thank Pizza Barn in Princeton. Also want to let you know that next week we're going to do kind of a year-end show and let John just pick over some of his favorite stories of the year. And since he comes across so many great stories in his travels and his reporting, I'm sure that will be a lot of fun too. But let's thank Pizza Barn, pizzabarnprinceton.com.
Yeah, here's the big news I'm aware of out of the Pizza Barn, Jim. On their drink machine, they now have Orange Crush. Ooh. And if I were still 10 years old, that's all I'd ever drink, Orange Crush. But that's pretty good. They've got everything else up there, everything you name it, they've got it as far as drinks and food. And they've got a kind of a cool thing that Jody Stay, who runs the show up there, they now have Pizza Barn stickers. And they've been having fun on social media with challenging people. Show us where you've put your Pizza Barn stickers. So I think the whole town of Princeton is going to be covered in these Pizza Barn stickers before long. But yeah, great people up there, great food. If you're going north or south on 169, go to downtown Princeton. Hit Pizza Barn on your GPS. You'll find it. You'll love it. And tell them Jim and John sent you.
And go to pizzabarnprinceton.com to find out what their pizza specials are and their beer specials and everything else. And they've renovated. It's just a cool place to hang out. So thanks to Jody Stay and her crew, which always includes a bunch of high school kids who are happy to work there as well. All right, let's get to Bob McDonald.
Yeah, well, I was up north. I stopped in to see my old friend Bob McDonald. He's the retired boys basketball coach from Chisholm. He's won more basketball games of any kind than any coach in history. And he's been away for a few years now. And he and his wife, Carol, who's a sweetheart, they live in assisted living in Chisholm. So I stopped in and spent some time with Bob and Carol. And what a treat, just to talk to Bob. And I always give him a hard time when I was working at the Star Tribune covering high school sports. On a semi-regular basis, I'd get a phone call from Bob, maybe a letter, a handwritten letter. And Bob wanted things done the right way when it came to high school sports, and not just basketball. He was the athletic director there for a long time. He coached track and other sports. and was a classroom teacher, a true educator. And I always give him a hard time because then he would always tell me, "Oh, I've sent letters to the high school league, many, many times, urging them to do what I think is the best thing to do." And so I always tell him when I got hired at the high school league, I said, "Hey, where do you guys? I understand Bob McDonald has written a lot of letters. Are they in a file cabinet